week on Motoring 90.
If you refuel at public refueling stations, you'll save 40%, at least 40% over the price of gasoline.
And yet the 1990 edition is so littered with mistakes that I'm surprised anybody wastes their money on it.
This and the grippy tyres provided perfect stops each and every time we dropped the anchor.
Motoring 90 is brought to you by Quaker State. The Big Q stands for quality. Always has, always will.
It's great music, isn't it? I love it. But you know, we're not here to cover music. We are here to cover cars. We're in Orillia, Ontario for the Sunshine Classic Auto Show. Now, they tell me there are about 20,000 people that live in Orillia, but they get over 24,000 right at this auto show. Sounds to me like it's worth a visit.
Show car owner is proud to show off his car. We believe in a little bit different theory than some. We do charge a car owner $15 to register his car, and then his goodies bag, t-shirts, and so on, he gets approximately $40 worth of goods back in his hand, and he gets to show his car off for the weekend, go for approximately $10,000 in cash, trophies, merchandise, and you have everything from, we'll say, your next door neighbor that's got his pride and joy in his garage to the guy that just follows the circuit for the cash money. It's, I think, the largest car show of its kind in Canada. We've got close to 500 vehicles on display at the present time. There's everything from fully restored cars to alcohol-powered funny cars. We've got a major collector car auction going on today where 200 cars will be under the hammer for the top money buys them.
Okay, can we get you to shut it down and open the trunk?
Okay. Tell me what kind of car you've got here.
I have a 1937 Ford Coupe.
It's a lot of fun out here, but for you guys, there's a lot of pressure with these judges scrutinizing them so closely.
Well, it is, but they got to be in good shape to be here.
What do you like about these things?
I like the enjoyment of driving them, coming to the car shows, and the people. You know, people look at them. You can see them in their faces.
Swing your lovely lady, then we'll all promenade. We're dreaming, 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 dreaming. Yes, that's what I'll always do. Walk around your corner, go home with no Paso. Partner left in the corner with the right behind about a left elbow. Men back and make an Alabama bar. Girls push behind. List of blood left Alabama, and with the ring you're doing fine. I'm dreaming.
11 years ago, the car show industry started off with very few people. And as parts got a little bit more accessible, more parts became available for certain cars, cheaper in a lot of avenues. A few years ago, to compare the price to today for parts, you just couldn't do it.
When we arrived at college, I was talking to my father, and I said, you know, there's this show on Saturday down in Orillia. And he said, well, you know, he pulls out the old photo album, and he goes, I had an old Parisienne convertible, 65, and sure enough, there's one here, and so we're looking to go back in the past and replace the car. I've always been interested in the old muscle cars or the old luxury muscle cars, which are very popular, but the muscle car market is really taken off, and so the cars are pretty expensive.
Tough question. Do you have a favorite car here at this particular show?
I love them all. I couldn't really pick out a car. That's why we hire judges. If I had my choice, everyone's first place.
Hi, I'm Graham Fletcher. Coming up on Test Drive, we look at a car that earned its reputation through an association with a brick wall like this.
Test Drive with Graham Fletcher.
This week on Test Drive, we look at the Volvo 740 Turbo. Now, this vehicle has earned itself the enviable reputation as being known as one of the safest vehicles to drive on the road today. The 740 Turbo features Volvo's new intercooled Generation 3 turbocharger. This improved unit reduces turbo lag time, improves performance characteristics, and ensures fast, efficient access to all 162 horsepower. During the acceleration tests, we recorded a sluggish 9 seconds to reach 100 kilometers an hour. This slow time was due in part to the heavy clutch action, long shifter throw and a bad vibration evident in second gear. Now this vibration can be attributed to the overly soft centre bearing support used in the three-piece drive shaft. The larger 55 series Michelin MXV2 tyres provided plenty of traction in the pylon test. Their outstanding performance, however, was sacrificed somewhat by the amount of body roll. Using larger anti-roll bars would improve the vehicle's stability considerably without sacrificing any of the highway comfort, which in our test car was very good. Vehicle safety and passenger protection have long been Volvo's forte, and as such it comes as no surprise that the 740 features a Bosch 2 anti-lock brake system. This and the grippy tyres provided perfect stops each and every time we dropped the anchor. Volvos have their own very distinctive style, meaning they stand out from the aero crowd. This is a refreshing change for which the stylists are to be congratulated. Our test Volvo was assembled in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and the fact that the fit and finish is of such high quality is a credit to the Canadian workers at the plant. Inside I was disappointed by the lack of headroom, the lack of which is due to the high seating position and encroachment of the power sunroof. The dash features a full set of analog instrumentation, which with the exception of those at the extremities are easy to read. The voltmeter and boost gauge are cut off by the steering wheel rim. This is compounded by the lack of a tilt feature. I found the radio controls too small and too fiddly, and because of the poor location of the power window controls, I found myself inadvertently adjusting the mirrors instead of lowering the window. A neat plastic clip holds your parking stubs in full view and keeps them out of the defroster vents, which is where they usually end up. On the safety check, the Volvo features front fog lamps, high-intensity rear fog lamps, which are not to be confused with the brake lights, child-proof door locks and three-point rear seat belts that feature a unique warning light to remind your passengers to buckle up. The lack of either a locking gas cap or flap disappointed me on a vehicle of the Volvo stature. The front seats are fully adjustable and despite their flat appearance provided ample lateral support as well as a great deal of comfort. This Volvo uses a Laycock overdrive unit which is activated via the top of the gear lever, the little button on the top there. Now back in the 70s, several British cars used the same Laycock overdrive unit to substitute for a fifth gear. My pet peeve? It was a poor design back there and it's an even poorer design today. They should have a true 5-speed. Now to the scoreboard and see what I thought of the rest of the 1990 Volvo 740. The new Generation 3 Turbo reaches its maximum 8 psi boost at 1800 RPM. This means that you derive maximum benefit at the speeds you need it most. Although we managed a 9-second time to the 100k mark with the standard transmission, the automatic model eclipses this figure easily without the aggravation of the Laycock overdrive. Despite the amount of body roll experienced, the Volvo handled itself very well. Some slightly heavier anti-roll bars would do the car and its superb tyres a real favour, making the suspension the equal of the engine. The Bosch 2 anti-lock brake system adopted provides perfect stops every time without the usual brake pedal pulsation. We managed stops from 80k in just 103 feet, which is excellent. The 740 is a well-insulated automobile that even at high speed does not suffer from any of the usual wind whistle, perhaps because it does not follow the aerodynamic tendency of most cars. We averaged 10.8 litres per 100 kilometres or 26 miles per gallon with the standard transmission. Although the automatic version is a little thirstier, it is definitely worth the sacrifice. The Volvo has a well-deserved reputation for safety, and with the improvements made to the engine, the only thing it lacks is a decent standard transmission. This may surface with the introduction of the all-new 9 Series Volvo later this year.
You're looking at a 1970 Superbird, the ultimate road runner. And with me right now is this car's owner, Wayne O'Shea. And Wayne, tell me a little bit about this car and what it could be worth in today's terms.
Be like everybody else, nobody will put a value on them. It's whatever the buyer will pay is the value of the car. One just went on an auction block in Nevada about 2 weeks ago and it was bidded up to $40,500 US and it never made it to a reserve bid of $75,000.
What makes this car so special?
They only built 1,920 cars. The only reason it was built for street production is they wanted to race them in NASCAR and they had to build 2,000 cars to qualify as a stock car. And that's the only reason they were built.
Now, would you drive a car like this every day on the streets?
I feel there's no sense having a car if you can't enjoy it and drive it on the street, and any day that it's sunny on the weekend, it goes out. And my other car's driven every day to work.
Have fun.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Wayne. All right, now time to leave the Super Bird and visit our friendly mechanic. We're talking, of course, about Bill Gardiner.
Last week we removed this drive shaft from an early 80s front-wheel drive car, and this week we're going to show how we go about disassembling and repairing it. The outboard boot is ripped, and that has to be replaced, obviously. So what we have to do is cut off the clamps that hold this boot on. You can do that with a pair of side cutters pretty easily. Set that aside. And the outer ring, the friction ring that retains this boot onto the outer joint. Now this outboard clamp's a friction fit, so to make it a little bit easier, we're going to use the installation tool backwards to drive that friction ring off the joint like that. Now we can pull it back, get it out of the way, and there's a snap ring inside this joint that we have to expand in order to remove the joint from the shaft. There, we release the snap ring, and we've taken the outboard joint completely off. That is the entire outboard CV joint. You can get a real good look at it in here, and we can see that this grease in here has been contaminated. There's actually some rust down in this area, and this grease feels real gritty between my fingers. So that may have worn that joint. That's something we're going to have to check for. And when we look down inside the boot, well, we can actually discard the boot because it's ruined anyways. And we can see a little bit of rust on this shaft here. So this whole works is going to have to be completely cleaned up before we can determine if it's reusable. If it's reusable, we'll repack this cavity with special grease and replace that boot and drive the friction rings and clamps back on. Now we've cleaned up this outboard CV joint and determined that it is in fact okay for reassembly. It wasn't worn or damaged beyond repair. So what we're going to do is repack it with that special grease that I mentioned earlier to lubricate these large ball bearings and the entire joint itself. Then we're going to reassemble it on the shaft and press that boot into place. So we'll place it in the vise and feed some of that special grease down inside the joint. And this grease comes with the replacement boot kit, by the way. So we finished packing the CV joint with the special grease. We're going to remove it from the vise and set it aside just for now. And bring the shaft back in. We've cleaned up the nose of the shaft, as you can see. The splines are free of any of the old grease. And now we assemble the clamps on the new boot. This boot, by the way, is around $24, but the joint itself ranges from anywhere from $150 to $300 depending on the make and model of car. So you don't want to let those things wear out or receive any damage unnecessarily just from something simple as a damaged boot. So make a visual inspection of those boots on a regular basis to make sure that they're not cracked or torn. Now the boot can go down over the shaft, and we'll press it. We'll push it on a little bit past where we would normally have it to get it out of the way. Now we can take the CV joint, mate it up with the splines, and press it home. I felt the snap ring click in, and I can no longer pull the joint off, so I know it's all the way home. Now the next step is to start the outer friction ring over the joint. We'll push it down, and we'll get the special driving tool, slide it over the boot carefully so we don't damage the boot, line it up with the ring, and now we'll hit it with a hammer to drive it all the way home. Okay, we've driven that friction ring all the way home now. It's butted right up against the joint. It's on properly. The next thing we have to do is burp the air out of this joint. As we compress that ring down there, we trapped a lot of air in that joint. We put that air under compression, and you just probably heard that little hiss there. That was the air coming out of the boot. We'll use a blunt object to burp that air out. Now the boot takes a neutral shape, and we'll install the inner clamp. It's a pinch type clamp. and we use a special pair of pliers to crimp that clamp into place. There it goes. And the pliers bring this clamp in nice and tight without cutting it or damaging it. The nose of them is kind of blunt, it won't hurt them. Now this shaft is serviced and ready to go back on the car. We've replaced the boot, cleaned it, replaced the lubricant. We saved this joint. So remember, it's very important to make a visual inspection periodically so that you won't wear out or damage these expensive joints on your front-wheel drive car. Until next week, I'm Bill Gardiner for Motoring 90.
A practice run at the Charlotte Motor Speedway has resulted in the death of a promising young driver. Keep your eye on the yellow and blue car of David Gaines as he bounces off the wall and comes to a stop in the middle of the track. 27-year-old David Gaines was pronounced dead on arrival at hospital from head injuries. The driver of the second car, Steve McEachern, suffered face lacerations and serious damage to his left hand. When Motoring 90 returns, fill her up the natural way.
I'm sitting in a Porsche RSK. This is the kit model, but the original was Porsche's #1 racing car during the 60s. In fact, it was nicknamed the Giant Killer. Small, isn't it? Probably easy on gas. And you know, that's one thing that all these cars at the show have in common. They're naturally powered by gasoline. But Deborah Burgess has discovered that there's more than one way to fill her up these days.
Transportation, economics, and the environment. 3 topics inextricably woven for the 90s. Or quite simply, how do we maintain our love affair with the automobile without spending a fortune or totally destroying our air? The natural gas industry believes it has the answer. Natural gas for vehicles, or NGV. It's being used in Australia, New Zealand, and Italy. The industry is now promoting it here in Canada. How does it work? Consumers Gas representative George Hughes explains.
Okay, what we have to do to the vehicle itself is we install a cylinder to hold the natural gas, either in the trunk in a car like this, or if it was a van or a pickup truck, we could install it underneath depending on the clearance. We also install a switch and a gauge for the driver of the vehicle so that he can see what fuel he's on. We install a gas regulator, a pressure gauge, and a fill point, and a few other electronic modules that allow this system to intermix with the onboard computer.
It's designed to be part of a dual fuel system to augment but not totally replace gasoline. With only 117 retail NGV outlets in all of Canada, we aren't quite ready to rely solely on natural gas for our transportation fuel. The driver can switch from NGV to gasoline while driving with just a flick of a switch. One of the really smart features of the NGV promotion, however, focuses on alternative refueling methods.
There are 2 ways to get natural gas into your car. You go up to a service station that is equipped with a natural gas dispenser and plug your car into the dispenser and it fills up in a matter of a couple of minutes. The other way to do it is to have a slow fill unit or a home refueling unit.
A home refueling device uses the gas from the household gas mains and feeds it into an electrically powered compressor, which then pumps the gas into the vehicle's storage tank under pressure.
The system is designed to refuel overnight while the customer sleeps. Now, this would take, for a car like this, it would take probably 4.5 hours to refuel it. And when it is full, it automatically shuts itself down. It's completely safe. It's got lots of safeguards in the system so that if the hose becomes disconnected or there is a leak in the system, it shuts down automatically. And one of the components is carbon dioxide. And carbon dioxide emissions from natural gas vehicles is reduced by at least 30%.
Most cars in Canada run on gas, but it's estimated that if 150,000 vehicles were fitted to run on NGV, Canada could avoid using 10,000 liters of imported oil every day. Now that could sit pretty well with our collective economic conscience as well as our environmental sensibilities. But these good feelings come with a price tag.
The biggest drawback in the natural gas program is probably too few stations available for you to fuel up.
Bernard Delaney converted his taxi to run on natural gas, and yes, it saves him money. But that wasn't the thing that seemed to please him most about the natural gas fuel.
I'm a little bit mechanical inclined, and natural gas performs better in a motor. You know, it's much easier on a motor and less tune-ups. If you keep your car regular grease and oil, you'll get much better performance on a motor run by natural gas than you would just about anything else.
The other reason, the real reason that people convert their cars to natural gas is to save money. It saves them money. If you refuel at public refueling stations, you'll save 40%, at least 40% over the price of gasoline to take the vehicle the same distance over the road. Refueling at home, of course, there's a cost savings, but there's also a convenience factor. How about never having to go to a refueling station ever again?
You will, however, have to get used to a little less cargo space in your trunk. I'm Deborah Burgess for Motoring 90.
Phil Edmuston, Canada's self-proclaimed car consumer advocate, has feet of clay. That's coming up next on Kenzies Corner.
Kenzies Corner with Jim Kenzie.
Oh, hi, I'm just going over the latest edition of Phil Edmuston's book, Lemonade, and I'm highlighting all the mistakes and errors I'm finding in it, and that's my third highlighter so far. Now, this book is a very popular publication. Over 150,000 of these things have been sold in Canada over the years, and yet the 1990 edition is so littered with mistakes that I'm surprised anybody wastes their money on it. Now, it's not Phil's opinions I'm concerned about in here. If he thinks that as an alternative to a front-wheel drive luxury car like the Lincoln Continental, you should consider the Peugeot 505, a rear-drive French-built sports sedan that hasn't been sold in Canada for 2 years, well, he's entitled to that opinion. If he thinks that as an alternative to the Mazda Miata, that neat little two-seat sports car, you should consider the Dodge 2000 GTX, a front-wheel drive, 5-passenger, 4-door mid-size sedan, well, he's entitled to that opinion, although I'm not sure that sort of car is going to make me forget about the fun of top-down motoring. Now, I'm more concerned about the factual errors in here. He must have at least a dozen models listed in here that are not available in 1990. He makes all sorts of references to things that are new this year, which in fact have been around for a year and in some cases more. He makes references to cars that have never been sold in Canada. So I'm going to suggest to you that even Phil Edmuston, though, can't be wrong all the time. He says Toyotas are reliable. Well, do you need to spend $15.95 to find that out? I don't think so. So, Phil, if the car makers made as many mistakes in their cars as you do in this book, I think you'd have a right to be upset with the industry. But as it is, Lemonade is faulty and should be recalled by its manufacturer. This is Jim Kenzie for Motoring 90.
Whew. Thanks, Brian. They call this a hover ride, and as you just saw, this baby can motor anywhere on and off the land. Well, that's it for this week, but make sure you join us next week for more excitement on Motoring 90.
Motoring 90 is brought to you by Quaker State. The big Q stands for quality. Always has, always will.